Hello, everyone. I just want to thank you all so much for taking the time to be with us today for the Summit Recap edition of Office Hours. For those of you who may not be familiar with us, Zuri Group is a full-service consulting agency that works exclusively with nonprofits. From peer-to-peer fundraising, website design and development, digital advertising, and Google Grants account maintenance to fundraising strategies, systems assessments and selections, full-scale CRM implementations, and everything in between, we are passionate about helping nonprofits use technology to build better relationships with their constituents and maximize their impact. My name is Lo, and I'm a digital marketing consultant here at Zuri Group. And for this session of Office Hours, we're going to be doing things a little bit differently. We just had our first annual Zuri Group Summit in New York City in July, and today we're going to be sharing highlights from some of those sessions with you. The summit was very much a conversation, and we're looking to continue these conversations with you here. So we'd love for you to ask questions and share your comments, and I'll be keeping an eye on the chat for those as we move through today's session. So however you decide to participate, we're delighted that you took the time to be with us. Our hosts for today are Howard Horowitz, our Chief Operating Officer, Ken Swift, President of CRM Services, and Kate Nivety, Senior Director of Strategic Services. Howard, let's kick things off today with you. Will you talk to us about how this all got started? Why did Zuri Group decide to host this event? What were the goals and what kind of organizations were there?
Okay, great. Thank you. I'm Chief Operating Officer, and John and I own the company. When John started the company 12 years ago, and I joined shortly thereafter, we met with a customer, Autism Speaks, and they had mentioned to us that you have all these great relationships in the market. What would really be beneficial to us, besides all of your service and such, is getting all of us together and speaking about the market and so on. And Zuri Group really was founded on the premise of relationships. We really have never had a salesperson. We just recently started that 12 years into the company. So we've really always been a relationship-based company. John and I worked at Conterra, and we worked with many of the organizations we still work with today. And it's always been something where we didn't have to sell our company, we have to sell our relationship. And the relationship has just grown over years. And we have such a diverse group of clients. So we thought, let's do it in New York, where we have a large contingency of clients, and just have a brainstorming session. We were not going to sell anything. We weren't going to start pushing our services or our software, anything that we were doing. We just wanted all of the organizations who come from a completely different background, with their challenges are all different, some are the same, and we wanted everybody to talk to each other, and really for Zuri Group to just sit back and to listen. And we thought it would be most effective for organizations to learn from each other and obviously vent to each other on certain challenges and so on and so forth. And we would contribute to ideas that we had from other clients that weren't present and so on. So it was really a think tank that we wanted to put together. And we had a very good turnout, and we're very pleased with it. We did on the East Coast, we'll probably do it on the West Coast next time, and just keep doing this year after year. It was really beneficial, we think, for the organizations that attended to get an idea from what similar organizations were doing and what they're not doing, and come up with ideas and so on and so forth. So that was the reason that we did it. We wanted to do it 12 years ago, and I guess, we finally got around to it a little later than we hoped to, but nonetheless, we did it, and we're very pleased with the outcome. And if people can stay connected that way, that's what's most important to us, is for organizations to continue improving what they're doing, raising more money, getting their systems more in line. And if one organization doesn't know anything about one particular aspect and another does, and if they can add to that, that's great. And if we can put those connections together, that's what the goal really was. That's sort of the genesis of where the summit came from.
That's perfect. Thank you. And I think that, judging from some of the feedback that we've had from attendees, that appreciation for being able to network and help share some concerns and solutions was really beneficial. I know that we had a number of child sponsorship organizations who were there, who we've actually created a LinkedIn group for, to continue those conversations that we started at the summit. So that's really cool. Thank you so much for sharing. Next, I want to get into some of the topics that we had during Summit, starting with data primacy and master data management. Kate, will you talk to us about the idea of the golden record and about what kinds of concerns and solutions around data management some attendees were talking about?
Yeah, absolutely. So the primary goal of this event was to allow everyone to contribute and talk amongst each other and with one another. And our role was really just to lob the discussion topics out there and sort of gather some of the feedback that everyone was saying in the room and talking with each other. It was great. Kicking off the summit with the most critical thing to all of us, the reason why we all have these systems in place, the data itself, I think was a great way to start the conversation, because everything that we do sort of stems from the decisions that we make from our data. We definitely talked about data management as a starting point. Almost every organization is doing some form of data management right now. And then applying governance to that over top of it is something that folks are moving more towards, where you're establishing business rules and you're establishing the expectations that you have of your data and how you want to use it. And that then becomes the framework for your master data management, which a few of the organizations that were present were already starting to talk about. The idea of the golden record is this, relatively unattainable. We want to have one constituent or one person record and base all of our systems off of that primary record. So we would have one person, and that person has an address. And whenever a change is made, the request is made centrally to make an update to that record, knowing that it would then permeate into all of the different systems that we have across the organization or across the campus. The idea of that is really difficult to put together. Historically, we have a bunch of legacy systems that are in place in all of our different departments that everybody collects their own information about the single person or about the single gift record or ticket holder. And so because everyone collects their own information, they feel as though their information is the most up to date or the most correct. When you try to compile all that information centrally and then have to make a decision about whose information is the most correct, you wind up getting departments that sort of push back on one another, and it's not an easy solution to say which one is truly the golden record or how to build the golden record from bits and pieces from your other systems. So the concept of starting that way with everybody come to the table and bring all of your data and we'll decide what is the best data, it has made it really unattainable for some of the organizations. One organization in particular, actually, I sat down with them and talked with him in more detail, because they are taking an iterative approach actually to master data management, where they're saying, yes, we have these policies in place for data governance, and we are taking a more mature department, one that has a lot of policies in place and really work on data management to make sure their data is clean and up to date as best as possible. And we're going to start master data management based on that. And once we have their buy-in, and once we've gone through the effort of building that portion of the MDM system, then we're going to take that story to another department and go do the same thing with them, having learned everything from this first department, having gone through the process with the stakeholders, understanding where the pitfalls are. So doing a more iterative approach actually chunks it up into smaller, more bite-sized or more manageable pieces, and makes the end result a much more mature thing by the time you get there. So instead of thinking about what the ultimate goal is and then doing everything you can right now to build to that ultimate goal, the ultimate goal actually evolves with the industry as well, which is pretty interesting. The coordination across departments is really the most important thing. It's not really the data. We can absolutely compile the data and make it a single golden record for every piece of information that we collect, but it's really about coordinating those departments and getting them to talk to each other and getting buy-in from the departments themselves, but also from the leadership. Those folks who are starting down that path feel as though it's this massive undertaking. And the folks who have already begun the process and have been working on it for a while realize that it's an ongoing project that just stays with them for, you know, the length of their life cycle with their systems. I think that there's a lot of value for anyone who's interested in establishing master data management at your organizations, or even data governance, to start networking with some other institutions that are similar to you, because having the understanding of what has gone right and what has gone wrong, what sorts of conversations you can start to have to garner buy-in, how to talk to leadership about it. All of these things are very important. It's a, you know, it's a big change management effort as much as it is a data effort. The networking that happened in that one session, I think, set the tone for the entire summit. It was great.
That's awesome. Let's move to the next logical place, CRM futures and experiences. During this session, attendees had an opportunity to discuss the aspects that differentiate the industry CRM options. Kate and Ken, can you recap for us what was discussed and share what we know about and what we expect next?
Kate, I'm going to go ahead and start off because I want to weave in something that this topic into a little bit of the MDM discussion that you were, or topic that you were just referencing. First off, the interesting thing about the industry is what we're seeing is there are so many solutions in the market right now that organizations are moving towards more kind of a hub and spoke type of mentality, as opposed to looking at kind of a vertically aligned solution. Whereas in the past, a higher rated solution institution may have gone to Ellucian and used a suite of their products that were somewhat integrated, or they might have gone to Blackbaud and used a suite of their products that were integrated. And now what we're seeing is kind of more of a best of breed type solution. So they're picking a solution that's kind of as kind of their hub, their CRM system of record, whether that be a Blackbaud solution or a Salesforce or an Ellucian product or something else entirely. And then they are going out to different solutions like Eventbrite, Cvent for events, or they go into a CrowdRise or another kind of online engagement platform like iModules, and then they're using something else entirely for email marketing. And so, in just what they have realized is that no one organization can build the best of all the solutions, but rather they are building great systems of record. And that's where master data management is critically important, because now you're gathering information not from one vendor or one solution, but rather you could be theoretically getting information from dozens of different organizations, and being able to ensure or do your best at trying to figure out who that golden record is. And then on top of that, you overlay the different departments within an organization, whereas in a higher ed environment, whereas you might have athletics as well as a major gift fundraiser, both of them feel that they have the most pertinent or most up-to-date biographical information for a donor because somebody bought a ticket online. So athletics thinks that information is more current than the gift officer who may have spoken to the person on the phone or had lunch with them and received the business card. So there's no kind of one size fits all. There is a little bit of give and take, and that's where those lines of communication really need to be opened within an organization to figure out kind of some policies and procedures of kind of master data management. It's not necessarily a technical or a solely technical topic. It's just as much a kind of a business and operational type of engagement.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. And in fact, you know, it speaks to the fact that we had attendance from organizations from all different stages in their systems life cycle also. So we were talking with folks who had legacy systems that they were considering replacing in the next 5 years, folks who are already in a system selection, folks who are in the middle of an implementation, who are fresh off of an implementation or have been live for many years and are now mature. And having everybody in the room thinking the same way about their data, especially those folks who are in the middle of a conversion or just went through a conversion and got to see all of the different types of data and how different the data can look from one system to another, sort of helped support the conversation, not just in the master data management conversation, but also in the the futures, the experiences and futures conversation where we were talking about the systems landscape and where do we go from here and do you buy or build. One of the topics that we talked about, in fact, was whether or not the vendors that offer these software solutions invest in their products. Are we seeing that the products are evolving to sort of keep up with the times, especially when you purchase some of these other tools you've mentioned, Eventbrite and Cvent, iModules, and so on. Are these tools evolving at the same rate as the industry? And in investment today, well, is that a long-term investment, or is that one that is, you know, intended for the next 3 to 5 years until the next thing comes out? It was an interesting conversation to sort of talk about what everybody else is using and whether to reach out to these other vendors to hub and spoke your systems landscape, or whether to sort of rely on the primary vendor who might have an enterprise solution for your CRM that doesn't check all the boxes yet.
Yeah, so as we look at the kind of the CRM kind of landscape as it sits today, and kind of where it's been for probably the better part of the past decade, over the past 4 or 5 years, I mean, really there's 3 or 4 kind of main vendors in the market, and then those vendors have multiple solutions. So you certainly have the Blackbauds of the world, you have Salesforces, and you have Ellucian. Now, each one of those, Salesforce, they really only have one CRM solution, but it comes in so many different flavors based on whether or not you're using the nonprofit success pack or not, or they've kind of rolled their own. I've seen one organization that went on implemented Salesforce, and at last count, I won't name the name, but they were approaching $146 million, I think it was, of investment into Salesforce. But then there's other organizations that have gone with a kind of a Blackbaud solution, and then in the Blackbaud world, you have things ranging from kind of low end, go online, set up your CRM solution, all the way up to kind of a Blackbaud enterprise CRM or Blackbaud CRM solution, and then you have kind of the legacy NXT products. The legacy of Razor's Edge products, and the NXT, the more modern NXT products that sits on top of that. And then Ellucian is for those of you that might not be in the higher ed space or in the Ellucian market. So Ellucian is a company that's kind of gone around and acquired, much in the same way as Blackbaud has acquired a bunch of software companies over the years. Ellucian has done as well. They have done it in a bit of a different approach by way of bringing in some private equity, and in doing so, now they have 4 or 5 different solutions that are all sold under the Ellucian name. And so things like Advance, and they now have a new solution called CRM Advance. They have Banner, and they created a kind of a more modern version of that called Banner Web. And then there's Millennium, which is, there's relatively few clients still on Millennium. There's still a handful of those organizations out there. And so all of those kind of fall under the Ellucian brand. Now, Ellucian as a company did a pretty exceptional job of kind of acquiring all these different solutions and bringing all these organizations under one umbrella. But what they were left with was a whole bunch of clients that were on 20-plus-year-old legacy software, client-server type applications, and those organizations were kind of chomping at the bit to get to a more modern user interface. They were looking at moving to the cloud, and so that's when, about 3 years ago, CRM Advance was released by Ellucian, and they have been working aggressively in order to migrate their other Ellucian customers off of those more legacy Banner, Millennium, Advance products onto this CRM Advance solution, which is based off of Microsoft Dynamics and is being sold as a software as a service type product. And so they are doing a pretty rapid rollout of that application. Last we heard, here in the last few months, they have, I think, 67 clients that are either live or in the process of rolling out that CRM Advanced solution. And the interesting thing about that number is they have managed to take 67 clients live or currently implementing those, whereas with Blackbaud and Blackbaud CRM, Blackbaud has 150 clients live or in the process of going live on Blackbaud CRM, and it's taken them, the first client went live 11 years ago. So it's taken Blackbaud roughly 11 years to get to work with 150 clients, whereas Ellucian has been able to work with 67 clients in a span of about 18 to 24 months. And so, which raises some question in terms of the how they are able to do that, and the quality of the services, and things like that, which is a topic we can get into here shortly. But it's interesting to see these different solutions as they've kind of come into market. Still, the Salesforces, the Blackbauds, and the Ellucians of the world are still kind of the preeminent fundraising CRM solutions that are in the market. There are a number of other smaller players out there, but those three are the kind of the big three.
Ken, you said something there about software as a solution, software as a service, sorry, and it made me remember the conversations that we were having about hosting and SaaS. So there are folks who self-host. They either host on their own organization's grounds on-prem, or they use their own independent hosting provider outside of these vendors. But there's a push, I would say. A lot of vendors are trying to push their products as software as a service or SaaS. And we're seeing that the subscription model is really becoming the way they're trying to push folks. Do you think that and we bounced a lot of ideas around in the summit, but do you think that the push for subscription model and push for software as a service is something that folks are stuck with, or do you think that the way it's going, we will still have the ability to self-host if organizations choose to?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because it's really two opposite sides of the same coin. Because in some cases, organizations are like, we want to move to the cloud. We realize that there's not a whole lot of value in owning and maintaining infrastructure on campus, on premise any longer. It's really expensive to operate data centers, and why not go out to a cloud-based provider like AWS and Azure, or some private cloud providers that are like Rackspace that have been around for a number of years. But when you get down to it, it's more of a marketing ploy for these organizations. I'll call out Blackbaud. So when Blackbaud released Razor's Edge, and well, that was almost like Razor's Edge 7, so that was 15 years ago, well, a little bit more than that now. And then they released Blackbaud CRM 10 years ago or 11 years ago. The interesting thing is those solutions were not made for a cloud. They were not made for a multi-tenant environment. Multi-tenant means that you have multiple clients running in one instance of the application, and then those applications segment their solutions by their customers. So when in the Salesforce world, and also in the Dynamics, to some extent the Dynamics world, all of the organization, every user in the world on Salesforce uses the same instance of Salesforce. Now each organization then has some flexibility in the way that they want to configure those solutions for their organization, but at the end of the day, they're still logging into the same kind of set of servers. Now, when Blackbaud released their solutions, SaaS wasn't even a glimmer in anyone's eye. And so what they did is Blackbaud very quickly, well, over a number of years, I shouldn't say very quickly, over the last several years, has said, well, our Razor's Edge solutions and our NXT solutions and our Blackbaud CRM solutions, those are all SaaS solutions. And that's where the marketing kind of spin comes into it, whereas they simply said, oh, it's SaaS, which means we host it for you, but they are not true multi-tenant solutions. Every client that is on NXT today still has a Razor's Edge database, and then Blackbaud has just put a new web-based interface on top of Razor's Edge. So when you look at its peak, Blackbaud had 13,000 Razor's Edge customers. Now, if all 13,000 of those customers move to NXT, effectively Blackbaud would have 13,000 Razor's Edge databases sitting in their data center at Microsoft, and then they just share a common user interface. And so it's not a true kind of multi-tenant application like Dynamics was built or Salesforce was built for. Now, to kind of parlay that into the conversation of, well, can you host? Can you not host? With NXT, Blackbaud has drawn a very hard line and said anyone who's going to NXT, you have no choice. You cannot host that solution. Plain and simple. That you have to use Blackbaud hosting. And so what that's going to do is organizations that are on the legacy version of Razor's Edge, it's going to force some of those organizations to really evaluate their options. They may or may not choose to go to NXT, because if they're not going to be able to host the solution anyways, then or they insist that they have to host it, then NXT is not even an option for them. In the same way that Salesforce, you can't host Salesforce on campus or on your own servers. You can't host CRM Advanced from Ellucian any longer. And so all these organizations are moving to subscription-based services, primarily for the recurring revenue. And so from a valuation perspective for the company, it's more valuable for them to be selling their services on a subscription basis than it is for them to sell perpetual licensing for a software. And so that's since like Blackbaud is a publicly traded company, Ellucian is private equity now, but what that probably means is they will probably go public again at some point. And so really what all those organizations are trying to do is prop up the valuation of their companies, and the best way for them to do that is through subscription revenue.
So before we move into integration resources, I just want to make sure that I'm allowing you guys an opportunity to pop in with your questions, but I will go ahead and move us into our next piece. You did mention hub and spoke model and talking about the fact that it's here to stay, so data integration is essential. Can you talk to us about pain points that organizations shared during the summit about the different solutions that are working, and share with us what folks can look forward to in the future?
Yeah, it's the pain points really center around the legacy solutions. So the solutions that have been in the market for many years that really were made for those more vertically aligned products that were in the market, where there was kind of a direct connection between those different solutions. As organizations move to this kind of hub and spoke, what we're seeing is more of a standards-based approach to the way that those applications are now being able to integrate in. And so when you look at solutions like the Cvent, the Eventbrite, you look at Evertrues, you look at other email platforms, they have all kind of centralized on standard integration frameworks. In years past, so if you go back a decade ago, it would have been web APIs based on SOAP, which is a kind of and kind of an old school way of building APIs. They were pretty heavy in terms of the amount of data that would have to go back and forth, and so they were inherently slow. And then with more modern-based APIs, they use what's called RESTful APIs, or you may have heard the term JSON, and that is just a much simpler and less heavy data contract, whereas there's just a whereas you may have had just trying to think of a good example. If you look at kind of a SOAP data to maybe update a constituent record, if you look at total number of characters that might be required in order to send that information back and forth, and you're talking probably thousands of characters of data. Whereas using a more RESTful JSON API endpoint, you might be looking at a few dozen or maybe 100 or a couple hundred characters of data. So you can pump a lot more data through the same connection, and they're just more performant. And so what we're seeing is all these new solutions. So all the Salesforce APIs use RESTful endpoints. Dynamics uses RESTful. Blackbaud is currently reworking some of their Sky API that they rolled out a couple of years ago, uses RESTful endpoints. And so it's nice to see that regardless of the vendor that is the system of record, they are using that. And then when you look at the third parties that are providing those point solutions, those kind of email platforms, those event platforms, they are all also kind of adopting those RESTful APIs. And so when it comes down to it, regardless of the language that those organizations are actually leveraging, to build their applications, they can all be made to talk to one another all but with a little bit of extra work, but they're all talking the same common JSON RESTful kind of language in terms of integration. And then with the advent of what was called Enterprise Service Bus, somewhere in the cloud, those are called integrations as a service. And what those are, there's organizations that has made it their business in order to build integration frameworks regardless of the system. And so probably the preeminent one that's out there right now is called MuleSoft. And really they've been around for a number of years, but really what it is, it's an integration framework that allows you to connect two different applications, talking two different languages, but all using APIs, and allows you to do things like schedule how often you want the data to be exchanged. If one side of the equation only allows CSV files to be transmitted, and another requires things to be pipe delimited, it can those types of solutions can handle those kind of translations. Or if one system does CSVs, but another system uses actual web APIs, then you can kind of do those data maps. You can embed in your proprietary business logic in order to do transformational logic as part of your integration. And so there's a lot of things going on that in the industry that, and it's not just this nonprofit tech kind of industry, but rather just the technology industry as a whole. Whereas it's just everyone is needing to do the same thing. They're needing to exchange more and more data. Data is king, and so the more data and the quicker you can get access to your data and keep that up to date and deal with those kind of master data management type things that we talked in the golden record that Kate referred to earlier. Those are all imperative, and using these different types of integrations and kind of the standards-based approach is really what's kind of really what's happening out there.
One of the other things we talked about, Ken, was the fact that some of these integrations tend to create a duplicate constituent record or duplicate gift record when really we don't want to. I think more and more we're seeing that it's the constituents where they don't share a common underlying ID. So whenever we have updates to a constituent record or something, it will bring into the core CRM a second record for that same person. I think that it's so common right now that it just is one of the main topics that people talk about when you say integration, but it's something that I think is being remedied more and more easily. So the scary part about integrating, instead of having a fully integrated solution, hub and spoke versus having an enterprise class single solution, I think is it's going to be less scary in the future because we're able to accommodate for all of these weird idiosyncrasies that have plagued people up until now. So, looking towards the future that way.
Yeah, that's a good point, Kate. The interesting thing is most of what you would define as your system of records, so the Salesforces, the Dynamics, the Razor's Edge, the Blackboard CRMs, all those solutions have some built-in inherent functionality to try to identify duplicate records at the point that they're coming into the system, and give the organization or a records management team the opportunity to try to match the constituent update or the gift or the event registration to the appropriate existing constituent in the system, or to create a new one. What we're seeing is almost more of a challenge because it's going the other way. It's organizations like NI Modules, where they are an online engagement platform where you can get donations, but you also want to be able to see your giving history, and you don't want to see just your online giving history. You want to see your online and offline giving history. You want to see any event registrations, whether you registered online for an event or you registered over the phone. And it's those solutions on the periphery, not the hub, but rather the spoke solutions, and trying to give them the data that they need in order to allow them to kind of aggregate the data. So it might not be it's the constituent data, but also the other information, so that from a constituent's perspective, it really looks like that kind of that quintessential constituent 360 thing that everyone's been talking about for decades now, that it's hard to realize is in this kind of hub and spoke model.
We did have one question come in. Integrations can deliver tremendous value, no doubt. In approaching such an effort, what trends or common approaches do you see, depending on waiting on a vendor, obtaining in-house knowledge, or hiring third parties?
That's a pretty broad question. So yeah, I mean, obviously, getting all your data under one roof is imperative in order to make business data-driven decisions. I'm not exactly sure kind of the particulars around the question, but in terms of kind of the skill sets required, that's where having developers that have some either experience or at least awareness of RESTful APIs. I'm certainly happy if L'Oreal, if you want to kind of share whoever that is, contact information, feel free to reach out. More than happy to have a one-on-one conversation with developers and talk about particulars about how you go about building out an integration or some of the kind of common pitfalls that you might have when you're dealing with duplicate management and things like that.
Yeah, I'll make sure that I get you two connected. Well, Ken, I think you also led a session on API functions that was very highly requested by attendees when we were putting the agenda together. This session looked at how data connections are made and where tech team members can improve connectivity. Can you talk to us about what was covered during this session and share some of the solutions and strategies that are working for organizations?
It really comes down to kind of from a skill sets perspective, and being that there are frameworks out there that have kind of made it their business in order to make integrations easier, from a technological skill set for your resources in order to create these types of integrations, the developers themselves, what they need to do is really I'm going to say it's somewhat generic, because what we're seeing is things are becoming less kind of platform or more platform agnostic with the use of these RESTful APIs and these JSON things. So all these integrations are now speaking essentially the same language, and as long as you can kind of adopt integration framework like I mentioned MuleSoft, but Salesforce has their own. Lucian with the release of their CRM Advanced product has a product that they're putting together called Ethos. Blackbot has their Sky APIs. All those different integration points for these different solutions that are in the market are all speaking that same language. And so, as I said, it makes those integrations possible. But still, when you're taking an event from a solution like an iModules or a cVent, and you're trying to push that data into say a Razor's Edge or a Salesforce event, those two things, they're fundamentally two different systems created by two different vendors, and those two vendors didn't talk to one another when they were trying to figure out how to build these integrations. And so there is always going to be a little bit of a lift in there in order to from an organization by organization perspective, to map the data to where it fits best within that application. So I would caution anybody. I mean, you can go out to Salesforce and you can go out to the Salesforce marketplace and you can download an integration for cVent. But what you will find is where you want to store that information in Salesforce versus where they kind of the out of the box integration that's cVent built for Salesforce. Those two might align 90%, but they probably will not align 100%. And so each organization will kind of need to kind of weigh those kind of off-the-shelf integrations that are built, and evaluate the configurability of those solutions, and then determine whether or not it's the best integration possible, or if it's a kind of a minimally viable solution that they can live with in order to have these two systems, these two kind of best-of-breed solutions talking to one another.
Excellent. We did cover a lot during Summit, but it wasn't all just sessions. There was a tour of the Whitney Museum, and we had a big dinner at a restaurant on the High Line. Can you guys talk about maybe what some of your highlights were just from the Summit overall, and what you guys are looking forward to at next year's Summit?
I can go first on this one. I loved breaking bread with everyone. I think that being able to sit, it was a very informal dinner. It was a bunch of picnic tables on the High Line in New York City, at a restaurant that served us a bunch of small plates. So it was family style, and we were able to have amazing conversations to the left and to the right and across the table, in a way that a more formal eating arrangement wouldn't allow, circular tables or something like that. The fact that we were passing food and commenting on that food, also it gave a lot more humanity to a very technical conversation earlier in the day, which I thought was great. The Whitney Museum, also very amazing. It brought a bunch of culture into the concept of systems and data that we had been talking about. We absolutely support museums and nonprofits that enhance our culture, and so it was a way to sort of immerse ourselves in the mission of one of the nonprofits nearby. I also had a favorite moment, which was on the morning of the second day. We were graced by Mike Chevsky, who walked us through data visualization, and talking about some of the tips and tricks that he has and uses when talking with folks about better ways to visualize the data that we had just talked about the day before. What is the data? How do we manage it? How do we get it from one system to another? What are our systems? And then day two was, all right, now that we have the data in the right place, how do we look at it? And how do we make decisions based on it? He gave the teams a bunch of different examples about what to do and what not to do. Apparently, my favorite thing on earth, the pie chart, is no longer a good thing. It is dead. That was news to me, but now I can no longer use the pie chart without thinking about that. But on the flip side of that, ultra creative data visualization isn't very helpful either. And so, what is that median of making it visually appealing to the eye, especially when you're looking at a dashboard, but also telling a very strong, very good story. He also did some demos of work that he's done in Tableau, which was amazing. He put together a dashboard within a week for the folks in the room, advancement style, which I think was very well received. The conversations that happened during that session and then after, I think were really valuable for everyone involved, myself included. I learned a lot from that. So those are my highlights.
Yeah, I would say my highlight, and then Howard, you can round us out. I would say the highlight is, I've attended a lot of conferences, but almost all the conferences that you end up attending are have an agenda, and those agendas are typically put together by the vendor. So if you go to an iModule conference, you go to a Blackwell conference, you go to Salesforce conference. They're, to some extent, they're kind of pitching their wares, and showing you what kind of new and better solutions that they are putting together. But they're still all under the same umbrella. And what I really liked was that we had people that, I think we had probably half a dozen different CRM solutions, or if not more than that, represented in the room. We had individuals ranging from higher ed all the way to child sponsorship and hospitals, and so it was a great mix of people, with a lot of different experiences and different perspectives, both from this kind of more systematic as well as from an operations standpoint. So it was great to get all those people together with, as L'Oreal, I think it was you who said, or Kate, I can't recall now, but and we had some topics that we wanted to kind of throw out there and throw out some kind of high level questions, but we did not want to come in there with an agenda and driving the discussions, but rather was very conversational, which was very, very unique compared to kind of a preaching from the pulpit type of conferences that most people are accustomed to attending. This is much more of a kind of roundtable.
Yeah, for me, it was a different perspective. Just the fact that we could pull it off after 12 years of thinking that we were going to do it was pretty amazing to me, because I had obviously my doubts that we're going to be able to pull this thing off. And not only did we pull it off, we pulled off some great organizations to come together and just have a real discussion. And we tried to be listening as everyone else speaks, and adding input where we could add input. And we aren't aligned with me. we're not partners with Blackbaud, we're not partners with Ellucian, we're not partners with Salesforce. We're completely agnostic. And to hear different organizations talk about all the different software and service and the pain points and the progress that they're seeing was actually, and I know I speak for John as well because he and I spoke about this during the conference, is just this is what we were hoping to have happen, and to see it actually happen, that rarely happens when you have a vision and it works the first time you try to implement it. So we're really grateful for everybody who attended and for our clients who showed, and our the organizations that we know that may not be working with us. Just for everybody's insight was the most beneficial thing in my mind.
I would agree with that. I think that one of the things that I like to do whenever talking with the teams that I'm working with is to align them with another client of ours who has a similar experience, or who may have done this in the past, or who may be at the same point that they are. So the two groups can sort of work through the kinks together. And it was an amazing opportunity to be able to do that all in the same room. Somebody actually said at the summit, that one of the attendees, that they have been trying to do this, exactly this, at the big conferences for so many years. And the big conference, the vendors who host the big conferences just can't seem to gather folks together with similar interest. But we managed to do it because we are there hearing from all of our clients what the problems are or what the successes are, and we love to be able to network them with each other. So this was the perfect opportunity to get people in front of each other, to introduce people to each other. And at the very end, they actually said, can we please have a mailing list or a LinkedIn group or something for this whole group, because we want to keep in touch with each other, which I think is the most success that we could have asked for at the event at all.
Really, what I saw kind of beneficial from the summit is it was small and intimate. I can't remember the kind of the final head count that we had there, but it was small enough that everybody got to know one another on a first name basis. And I think we would not want to lose that. I mean, you go to one of these other conferences, and I mean, there could very easily be hundreds, and in some cases thousands of people. And it feels like walking around a college campus. I mean, you might recognize some faces as you're walking down the hall, but that's kind of the extent of the interpersonal communication you might have. And I think we would rather have multiples of these types of events annually, and keep them small and intimate, rather than have large events where the intimacy of the group is lost.
That's the goal. And we're going to do it in different locations so that, people who on the West Coast can't get to this, or people on the East Coast can't get to it on the West Coast, that they have the opportunity. So we're going to try to do multiple of them and keep them at a smaller size to keep it exactly as you described.
If there's somebody that is passionate about these events and certainly wants to attend in the future, and even better yet, is willing to host, has the facilities to host this type of event, have some large conference rooms and things like that can host a few dozen people, please reach out, please share that with us, and we would obviously love to kind of bring the location to you, if you guys can help.
Absolutely. I'm really looking forward to seeing what we put together for next year. Well, I think that brings us to the end of our hour together. Howard, Ken, and Kate, I really want to thank you for taking the time to give those of us that were not able to attend this year a little taste of what we covered during the first annual Zuri Group Summit. And I also want to thank all of you for taking the time out of your day to join us. If you're interested in attending the next summit, or if you've got an upcoming project that we can be of an assistance on, email us at officehours@zurigroup.com, and we'll work to get you in touch with the Zuri Group team member who can best assist you. Kate teased this a little bit, but actually next month's office hours will be all about data visualization, and we'll be joined by data viz whiz Mike Chichevsky, who will be helping us understand what data visualization is and isn't. I'm doing a live Tableau demo and taking your live questions, so looking forward to that. If you'd like to be notified when we have new webinars, integrations, or software solutions, please sign up for our mailing list at zurigroup.com/subscribe. We look forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.